So first, we'll have Michelle give a quick tour of the box office company before talking with Christian about what presence and reputation management is, and why you should care about yours, and apparently why I should care about mine. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. I'm going to share the screen a little bit larger so you can see. So Christian, if you want to move to the next slide. So a lot of you already know who we are as a business, but the Box Office Company is dedicated to innovating the box office through media, technology, and data. A lot of you know us through, the data provider that we do for sharing the showtimes, etc. on Google. Also, a lot of our SaaS platforms. So you'll have heard the word Boost probably way too often. But that is all of our SaaS products that we offer. We also offer business intelligence tools for studios. And also one key part is the Box Office Pro, which is the magazine, and the Box Office Company, which is part of the overall business. The Box Office Pro celebrated last year their 100-year anniversary, which is great. Next slide, Christian. So as you know, what we are dedicated to at the Box Office Company is creating a SaaS platform solely and surely for the theatrical industry. So we only work with cinemas. What we do is we deliver technology to allow you to sell your tickets online, to sell your tickets through a mobile app, whether that's search engine optimization, PPC, etc. If you could go to the next slide. So the Boost ecosystem is something we've spoken about in the past. What we're focusing on today is on the left-hand side, you can see that there's a section called Boost Traffic. And Boost Traffic is all about the beginning of your consumer user journey. So how to gather more traffic to your website, how to gather more moviegoers, whether that's through social media, whether that's through Google My Business, Google Maps, TripAdvisor, etc. And then obviously we've got the other parts of the ecosystem which are equally as important, which is how can you convert those new customers and that traffic to purchase tickets? And then how do you analyze that data off of the back of it? So today we're going to talk about, in the top left, you can see very new product that we're going to be talking about more today, which is how to manage your presence on Google and across all 100 odd other networks, and the importance of doing that. And that also refers to listings and reviews. Reviews also remains a very important part of this whole process, because people will tend to read your reviews on Google before they tend to go to the movie theatres. And I'm going to pass over to Christian now, and we're going to get started.
Excellent. Thank you both for the invite. It's such an awesome experience to be able to speak with everyone today about the Presence product and why your digital presence is so important. And we'll make sure throughout, I know Scott and Michelle will interrupt and ask questions, but something I will tell everyone is if you have questions, go ahead and throw them in that chat. We'll be monitoring as we go, and that way we can sort of keep this conversational. But when we start thinking about sort of presence in general, one way to think about this is if you were to look at the Brody Mart, a small town sort of shopping convenience store, or if you were to look at the beautiful town of Hillsdale, New Jersey, or if you were to see the Dynasty Buffet, or if you were to look at the Elmhurst Hospital, my all-time favorite broken neon sign example. What is absolutely fascinating about this is if you were the business owner of any one of these, or let's say the mayor of Hillsdale, how fast would you be on a ladder to fix your neon sign and make sure that when people drove by, they actually saw something outstanding, and really that grabs their attention and helps them be found? Now, growing up, I remember this. We would sort of drive around looking for a restaurant and look for the signage before pulling in as a kid. Nowadays, no one drives around looking up. Unfortunately, and quite dangerously, many of us drive around looking down at our phones, where we're trying to understand what direction are we going. And so long before anyone will ever see your signage, your physical signage, they're seeing what we would call your digital presence. And it's really your digital signage as well as all the other information and data that people want to see about your business. So I still think this is one of the best ways to think about digital presence, which is if you would fix these neon signs, it's absolutely critical, even more so today, to fix the broken data and information out there about your business. And when we click on something like movie theaters and we look at movie theaters, this is what we're talking about. So if I were to Google theaters near me, or if someone types in, birthday party theater or corporate event theater, anything related to getting people into the theater or to engage with your business and your brand, they're going to start here. In fact, 93% of people start their journey to your business with Google search or with search in general. And so that's a lot. I mean, many of us still type in Home Depot into Google, even though we know we want to go to Home Depot's website, right? It's just habit at this point. And so when you think about that, it means this data has to be correct. But also, and very importantly, it's not just getting the data right here, it's actually getting the data right everywhere that really matters. And so when I click through and talk, I'm going to give you a couple of statistics that came out kind of during the pandemic and as things were really kind of, people were trying to understand what does the pandemic mean. And I only bring this up because in many parts of the world, I was just in London 2 weeks ago, it's now completely open. There's no masks. People are everywhere out and about. And that's outstanding. It's just a wonderful thing to see. But Accenture did a study in 2020, at the end of 2020, the very end, after, really 8 to 9 months or a full year, depending on where you're dialing in from. And they found that 80% of consumers are now more digital than they were pre-pandemic, which is incredible. Basically, people said, not only do I use my phone or my digital system more, but they actually predicted that they will prefer digital channels following the pandemic, which is really interesting. It means that now that people are so used to using Google Maps or Apple Maps or calling for delivery or finding out if you're open or if you have COVID restrictions, they're so used to that. They don't think they're going to give that up. In fact, I to this day now at this point, I'd never go into a Starbucks and wait in line. I always order, even though I know it, just because it's so much more convenient and now I'm used to it. So another interesting fact is that we have found that 90%, this is also from Accenture, 90% of consumers use search at every stage of the customer journey. So that could be them just researching doing a corporate event at your theater, or me researching doing an event for my 7-year-old's birthday party at your theater. I'm going to do that all the way through the process. So it's not just sort of at that last minute where we decide, hey, let's go see the new Spider-Man. It's actually much earlier than that people are engaging in search. So when we talk about search, it's really important to understand we're actually talking about a much larger ecosystem than just Google. Google is absolutely the 800-pound gorilla, depending on the market you're in, for mobile and for desktop. However, the way that search data works and the way local data works is Google isn't just looking at the data that we provide them by having a GMB listing. They're actually looking at data across the ecosystem. So there's two different ways they see data. They see direct data, but they also check other websites. So they may look on Instagram or Facebook or crawl Yahoo's data or crawl Apple's data. All of these different systems have different methods for analyzing and improving local data, because it's absolutely critical to them that if someone asks them a question, they want the right answer, which is your theater is here. Here's the time it opens. Here's those show times. Here's all the data that I need to know in order to engage with you as a brand. And so what becomes very critical is you have to fix the data everywhere if you want to see more showing up in Google or a better ranking in Google. And it makes a lot of sense. I'll offer this. Michelle was saying earlier before we got on that she's in Mexico City. And I said, I've just heard such wonderful things, but I've not been to Mexico City. But if I got to Mexico City and I was in a meeting at box office with Michelle and 10 other people, and I said, where can I go to get, let's say a great, cup of coffee in the morning tomorrow? And if all 10 of those people said the exact same coffee shop with the exact same address, with the same phone number, with the same menu, how confident would I be as a person going to that coffee shop? I would be very confident. And that's the same thing Google is doing. It's checking everywhere to understand how confident am I that this data that I have about this theater is correct. Because if your data is a little off, it actually can throw off how they view your data. And so I'm going to demonstrate that for you so you get a sense of what that looks like. And one real important statistic is just having your own website is critical. You have to have that. That's part of your presence. But the network that I just showed of all those websites that we can power with your data gets almost 3 times as many visitors. Think in your own life how many times you look up something on Google Maps, or you might ask Alexa or Siri. You get that way before you actually reach the website. And sometimes you never actually go to the website. You just find out what you need directly from the search engine. So now, why is this important? Well, if I can get all of you to try something with me for a minute, take out your phone. It's never more than a few, less than a foot away from everyone. So if you take out your phone, what I'd like you to do is, if you have Apple Maps, open Apple Maps. If you have Google Maps, open Google Maps on your phone, and go ahead and type in movie theater. And you're going to see a bunch of businesses come back. And for many of you, you might actually see your theater. But if it comes back, go ahead and click on the first theater. The first one I see is actually this IPIC Theaters. And I'm going to click on that. And I'm in Google Maps. And what I want you to do is, if you're in Google Maps, just shake your phone. And when you shake your phone, you're going to get a little pop-up menu that says report a data problem. And I'm going to click that. If you're in Apple Maps, just scroll to the very bottom and you can actually see report an issue. And when I do that, right, and what it actually lets me do is change the name of IPIC Cinemas. I can change it to Christian's Movie Theater. And if I do this with 10 of my friends, tomorrow in Google, this will say Christian's Movie Theater if they're not actively managing this. Why? Because data from users is really important to Google in terms of making sure that it's correct. So there are literally millions of these updates every day where people are just trying to be helpful. What they don't realize is they're actually just on the wrong block. They think they're in front of where they should be, but they made a mistake. And when they update this data, or you can even have people that are competitors updating your data, you have to stay on top of this. And when they change it on a few pieces of the puzzle, it can actually affect how you rank in other areas like Google. And so that's just one example. And if we were all in the same room, in the same area, and we all changed the local theater to Christian's Theater, it would be changed within a few hours to actually saying Christian's Theater. Now that sounds terrible and it sounds unfair.
And unfair because I would get blamed for that, and a bunch of theaters would contact me saying, "Hey, my theater name is wrong." And I'd say it's right in my database.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it is kind of fascinating that I think for many people they're like, "Wait, it's that easy to change or mess with data?" But it is, because in the end, we actually do want to hear from people what the data is. The difference here is when it comes to your business, you really don't want that stuff changing. You might want to know people are trying to change it, which is actually part of the platform we're discussing today, where we get suggestions from people, but it doesn't change without your authority. And that's a good thing. It means that you as the business owner, the theater owner, you're in control of this information, but it's critical to control it everywhere. And I'll show you an example why. If you were to look at this business, this is a business for, let's say, a delicatessen. And I'm going to show you this one in particular. But what you're seeing here is we scan this business every few weeks over the course of about 18 months. And I want to give you a visual representation of how hard it is to get data correct, which is on this day, October 8th, this business name, its phone number actually changed on just Bing and Avantar, 2 directory-powered systems. Now, the next time we scanned it, the business number changes back to 2100 from what it was a second ago, which was 3334. But it changed on other directories because they all kind of listen to each other and they all kind of crawl each other's data. So what starts to happen is, if you were to look at this business, see it's still a deli, and then right here, this one directory now thinks it's a liquor store because it's probably a place that sells liquor as well, right? But they change it to a liquor store. Now you keep going, look at sort of how this data changes, and there are these little errors over time. It's not sending a consistent signal. And so if you were a theater in this case, it could be like, oh, your hours are changed on one location, or you're closed out of a COVID response on another location, but you're actually open. The issue for this is not only are consumers using these apps and maps and systems to find you and engage with you, but it also creates this data problem. See, Google and all the other data platforms and search platforms out there, they are not looking at your data just at one moment in time. They're actually analyzing your data through time. And so when you look at this chart, this is a real business. I feel for them. It's just a hot mess. They don't actually manage their data. And if you don't manage it and you don't keep it perfectly consistent, it sends this, let's just say, a non-confident signal to the algorithms saying, we're not sure if this is a liquor store, a deli, we don't know what the phone number is. That's why they lower in ranking. Because if I'm Google, why would I risk showing this place that may not even be a deli when I could show a deli that people are looking for and there's a perfect signal? So does that make sense? Hopefully everybody gets that. If that makes sense in the chat, let me know. But it's all about that consistency across the whole ecosystem that is absolutely critical. So when we think about the data, the other amazing metric that we can see working with box office across all of these sort of locations is it's not just the data on the name, the address, and the phone number of the business, or even let's say the hours of operation. Those we would say are like core data elements. But what's really important is we have found a direct correlation. The more information you feed to the Google and to the ecosystem, the more you feed them, the higher you rank or the more you get engagement. Now, I'm just going to ask everybody in your own life, think of this. If you walked up to the front of a theater and the owner is standing out front and he said, well, excuse me, do you have corporate events? And they say, yes. And that's all they say. They don't tell you anything else. There's no additional information. It could be like, well, how do I schedule? How much does it cost? What are the other services? Do you have food menu? You have all these other questions that you want answered, but it's not a great experience if it's just like a yes or a no, or there's not even information about it. So one of the things that all of these platforms focus on is not just the name, address, phone, but also these detailed information and so photos, menus, additional things like if you're going to host events, obviously many of you host events at your venues, that data is critical. So we use the same platform that synchronizes the name, address, phone, and all those attributes to synchronize all of this additional data. And what the data tells us is we can see all the traffic that goes to your business from Google and other platforms. And we can see that businesses that highly optimize that data, meaning they fill in a beautiful profile, when they fill in all that data, they receive on average 52% more clicks. And again, I want to just offer, I know everyone wants to think Google's algorithm is insanely complex, and it is, but think about what they're just trying to do. They want to make sure that when I have a question about my son's birthday party that I want to host at your theater, if they know that there's 15 theaters that could provide that service, but 3 of those theaters have all the information that would help me make a choice, of course they're going to show those first. Of course they're going to promote those in the ranking because they want that customer to engage with Google. If Google doesn't provide great answers, and if Alexa and Siri and all the other platforms don't provide great answers, people stop using them. So this is why you're almost in partnership through box office with all of these platforms for your digital presence. So let's talk about another absolutely vital piece of this, which is reviews. Now, reviews, a lot of you know how important they are. And I'm going to show you in a minute that even Google has come out and explained how important they are. But when it comes to reviews, there's some fascinating things to think about, which is, yes, you should always respond to negative reviews. But there's also this entire other portion of it, which is when people have positive reviews, and you may have seen this, a lot of times when there's positive reviews, you'll see people sort of engaging back, like they like that the business is engaging. But this is tough. For a business owner, managing and responding to all the reviews, not just the negatives, but the positive ones too, is not easy. It takes a lot of time. So through this same platform, we can respond to the reviews, and box office can manage that for you to ensure that you're really engaged properly. So there's a lot of value to this, but one I'd like to share is, and you may see this, is actually fascinating, which is we have done studies on people that only respond to negative reviews to try and make the person, increase the review or change the rating by engaging with them. But here's a little secret that we found out over the years. If you respond also to the positive reviews, what happens is every single review has a positive review. One of the things that's amazing about that is people leave less negative reviews. Now, I'll explain why, which is a lot of people get mad psychologically and they go to the interwebs to voice that anger. And so they come and they're just gonna hammer you and say what a bad experience they had. But here's what they see when they get to your review site. They actually see that you as a business owner aren't an empty website. You're a human that answers every review. And suddenly, psychologically, we have found people take a step back because they realize they're actually talking to someone, not just airing and posting something on a bulletin board. And so that active review management is critical because it can keep those negative ratings from really dragging you down. But it also shows the audience that you're paying attention and you're not necessarily going to just let someone just go crazy with a negative review. So you want to answer all the reviews, and you really want to focus on making sure that customers know you are present and you will respond. Now, I'm going to share quickly. This comes from Google My Business. They published this a few years ago, and it's still so important. Many of you talk about, how do I rank higher? And Google has been very clear in local businesses, which there's 3 absolute characteristics for ranking. The first is the distance from where a person asks the question. So if you're a theater 100 miles away, that's not gonna work. There's gonna be other people closer. The second is relevance. So when I ask a question like birthday party at a theater, the only way they know that's relevant is if you've told them that you offer birthday parties at your theater. That's critical data that goes back to the point of making sure all the data is in there. But the third thing to distance and relevance is prominence. Now, they use the term prominence. What this really is just your rankings, your reviews. And prominence is critical. So if someone says best theater to have a party or best theater for a corporate event, what you're going to find is if they use the word top or best and you have lower than 4 stars on the aggregate at Google, you're not going to show up. They have a minimum threshold of 4, and the higher you can go, the better. So if you want to show up for these really high intent sort of queries, you've got to sort of have all 3 of these. Now, obviously, you can't change where I am when I search for the theater. That's the searcher. But by making sure that all the data is correct on your business, you have included all the potential things someone could do there, which is they can eat, they can go maybe to the arcade there, they can host an event. All of that is in the relevance. And then the prominence is making sure that you respond and take care of those reviews. So what are the sort of the important parts of managing your digital presence? And I throw it up here on just 4 quick items, which is number 1, and honestly, probably the most important, is it's a better customer experience. If I know that the data and anywhere I look, you are managing this, I, as a consumer, have a better experience. So if I want to know about how do I throw a birthday party, my son's over the moon on Spider-Man. If they want to do Spider-Man and do a party, if we're going to do that, I want to know that, number 1, you allow that sort of thing. I can rent out the whole theater. I want to know what times are available because it's not all times, obviously. All that data is really important to me. The second thing is, because you've done the first thing, you're going to get more engagement from me, but you're also going to signal to Google and all these search ecosystem players that you're engaged and you have the answers people are looking for and that you're the authoritative source. That helps conversion. Then that increases additional discoverability, which is when I Google something or I Google theater or theater near me, what I want is if you've got the first 2 done, it actually increases the likelihood that you will rank higher. Now, I have to put the caveat. Google changes its algorithm. And the reality is sometimes you'll rank high one day and you'll rank low. And you also got to realize when I run a search, it's different than when Michelle runs a search and when Scott runs a search, which is Google's logic also takes into account what else we've looked for. So Google knows that I'm a dad and with 3 kids and where I live. They know how to rank differently. But that's not to say that doing the right data things, the right data strategy and the right review strategy doesn't help you rank higher. It absolutely does. It's why so many people spend so much time solving this as a small business. Lastly,
yeah.
sorry. Yeah.
I was going to say, I think just to add to that, Christian, it's a good point to say that this is a very good supplementary solution to saying, okay, you've got search engine optimization as a strategy. It's a long-term strategy where you make sure your site is well optimized so that discoverability sites can crawl your website and make sure that you show up higher in the listings. But this is really focused on local SEO. This is where your traffic's going to come if someone's Google mapping or looking for activities if they're on holiday or vacation somewhere. These are the kind of activities and reputation and presence management that's going to help supplement everything else that you do as part of your overall marketing strategy as well.
Yes, it's I hate to use the balanced breakfast approach, but it really is, right? This is yet another part of having a very robust strategy. When we think about this, and I love the diagram of the ecosystem that you opened with earlier, Michelle and Scott, which is the reality is presence, if you think about it as a marketer, is really that top of the funnel. It's where you're going to get the largest exposure because people literally driving in cars are asking questions like, is there a movie theater nearby? You need to be there. And if you don't rank really well, it's usually due to either data errors or really bad reviews or really inaccurate information or lacking information. And so your local SEO strategy needs to work together with your advertising strategy, your billboard strategy, all these things. Like, how many of you have ever been on the highway driving and you see a billboard and you basically like pull the car over to the side so you can write down the phone number? Yeah, no, I've never done it either. Not only is it dangerous, it's just no one's ever done that, right? But what happens when you get back to the office or you get back home? You remember one or two key elements of that billboard where you go, hey, corporate event theater, it was on that billboard. When you do that, what you're doing with your digital presence, and this is a great way to think about it, is your digital presence is your insurance on all the money you spent on that billboard, which is they're gonna find you when they type something in off that billboard. It's such a great way to think about it because there's so many different advertisement and different parts of the marketing strategy. But a lot of times, whether it's television or radio or billboards, people don't necessarily go right to it. They come back to it later. And so your digital presence is that net that catches them when they come back in looking for that answer. So it's a great point, Michelle. And obviously, hopefully with these three buckets, our goal with this is we want to increase the fourth bucket, which is consumer purchases and engagement. And really, a lot of times that also is making sure if you do have menus, obviously most of you do, you have menus, you have drinks, you have different specials, you want to make sure that data is in here as well, because that can increase the consumer's understanding that they're actually going to go there, not just for the theater, but also for the other services that are possible. So in terms of getting started, I turn this over to Michelle and Scott. This is all about contacting and working directly with box office.
Yeah, and I know we had budgeted for half an hour, but I think I have a couple of questions. So if people need to drop, understand that this will also be recorded, and everybody who registered will get a link to the recording afterwards. So you won't miss anything if you do need to drop. So I think, in the movie theater space, Christian, something that happens quite frequently, and you kind of touched upon it with the hometown deli. Is it a deli? Is it a liquor store? Well, is this particular theater, is it a movie theater? Is it a restaurant? Is it a bowling alley? So how would a theater through the service reference that? I want to show up when somebody says bowling alley near me and movie theater near me, and for that matter, restaurant or bar near me.
Yes. Yeah. So I know there's a small town in the Jersey Shore where they have these great theater bowling alley bars. And it's getting very, very popular. It's actually a really interesting business model because it's a triple threat model. And when we look at this, if you're Google, what you're trying to understand is those are multiple categories. And Google wants to walk a very fine line here, which is there's also people that, let's say it's a gas station that has, burgers and sandwiches. They want to show for both the restaurant and for the gas station. So what Google has, and what every one of our platform partners has, is they have multiple category designations where your primary category is the thing you most want to show up for. And that's important. but you can actually add additional categories to show up in more categories. So even if your name of your brand is theater, it's really important to make sure that you can have those other categories, which is part of this service. I will offer, you have to be a little careful. So if you happen to have sushi on the menu, but that's not the main thing you want to show up for, don't put sushi restaurant, because what Google is looking for, and it's not just them, it's really all of the platforms, they want an honest dialogue with what do you really do. But one of the best things you can do, Scott, is you ensure that those additional services, those additional product lines, so bowling versus theater, they're all part of this digital presence. And that comes down to working closely with our team at Box Office to ensure that, hey, Box Office needs to understand everything you've got. And so that's that element of work closely. If you add new service lines, if you add a bowling alley off the back of the theater, you've got to let us know in this product, because we're going to update all that information everywhere.
And I don't recommend serving sushi in your movie theaters.
It might be a bridge too far. I did see someone commented on the axe throwing, which is gone crazy. I've done it many times, and I'm like, it's quite fun. But again, if you're going to be an alcohol bar and axe throwing, you might want to think about how that works out.
They've got it sorted. That part's been done. So I do update my listings. Let's say I do this. I update my listings, add my axe throwing, add my bowling alley. What should set my expectations? How long before I'll start seeing an impact in the search engines with this information?
Yeah, it's a great question. And obviously it differs. And I hate to say that, but anything in search, there's really two different time frames I want you to focus on, which is if you let's say you start opening 2 hours early and you're changing your opening hours, you're changing the menu. When you make that change in the Box Office Presence platform, it is actually going to update the data on Google and other places almost instantaneously. It is a real-time API, both to Google and all those other platforms and back. However, that's different than where you rank or show up. Meaning, if I ask then a question about, do you have axe throwing? I'm going to stick with the axe throwing. So if you have axe throwing, that you added to your profile, and it's live, but it may not start to rank for that because it takes a while for Google then to see, and to not just Google, but any search system, to see a consistent message that axe throwing is not somebody shaking their phone and basically joking around. It's real and it's everywhere. So you'll see this time frame, and honestly, it can take a few weeks, a few months, but I would offer, it's not so much about what is the timeline to the efficacy of the higher rank. That is obviously important. It's on everyone's mind. It's also just that the data is correct. And so the more you do that, you'll see the instant benefit of that, which is anytime someone asks a question, they're getting the right answer on your theater. The ranking takes longer. So that's a good way to think about it. It's really two things. And it particularly matters on sort of how long. And also it can depend, quite frankly, on like the density population around your theater. How many other theaters are there? What's the competitive landscape look like? But I would offer most of your competition that's beating you, if they are, it's because they're really paying attention to this. So this is something you should be doing regardless of how fast it's going to impact. And then there's one other thing, which is the longer you keep it consistent, not that the data can't change, you should change it to be accurate, but it should be consistent for a long period of time. So this isn't something you do once and you're kind of done, because people shaking their phone, other data sets, other businesses trying to act like they're your business, that stuff goes on all the time. So you've got to keep that consistency going. And I see a question from Stan.
I think it's just for this one, it's to make sure there's a clear differentiation between showtimes distribution. So showtimes distribution is what we refer to as the Google One Box. So we will distribute your showtimes or cinemas showtimes, and they have the ability to then click on a showtime directly in Google or Bing, wherever you may find this experience, and go to your cinema website and purchase a ticket. This experience in terms of listings management, etc., is not anything to do with the distribution of showtimes. This is purely if you Google map a location near you, or you try and find a movie theater near me, it will show you Google Map options. If you search showtimes near me, then you'll get the Google One Box experience. It is two separate products, but as you can probably tell, they are quite nicely interlinked. It's important that you keep your listings managed well and up to date, and also that will again make sure that the showtime data is correct, and with both you'll be able to be found quicker.
Yeah, it's actually such a complementary concept, right? Which is a lot of times, depending on how people ask the question, they're looking for the time, and then other times they're asking the question because they're looking for the theater. And so you really want to have that whole area coverage, and I think Box Office really offers that.
Great. I think we've got one other question from Graham. So the question is, when creating third-party listings manually, we have found the time for listings to go live to be months, and sometimes the listings never appear at all.
Yep.
Does this tool bypass?
Right.
Yeah.
So you can log into all these 150 this network of however many sites and make all these updates yourself. And that's obviously very time consuming doing that. But then there's also that can take a long time for Bing or Yelp to update. So the question, yes, Christian, how quickly does it bypass? Does it skip the line?
Yeah, it's a great question. So essentially, when you're doing it that way, you're kind of making a manual entry. And remember that radar slide with all the little errors? There's two big problems. Number one, if it takes 5 minutes to update 100 different platforms, that's 500 minutes just to make one menu change. So that's a little bit of an issue just for all of your own sanity. But there's the other problem, which is as the data is changing, you're not aware that there's errors. So you don't even know you need to go change it. Right. And that's quite frankly, I think, a bigger problem, which is it could be wrong for 6 months before someone says, hey, did you know your theater is listed as closed? That's the bigger problem. And so what the system does is we have direct API or programmatic interfaces with Google, Bing, Yahoo, Siri, Alexa, all the different platforms. So when we bring it to them, as Box Office, we're basically saying, hey, we represent the owner. The owner has the right to update this data. We'd like to provide that direct data. It can take a day or two for some of these platforms, but it's nowhere near what you're experiencing manually. Manual submission is sort of, I mean, it's literally, it's the horse versus the Tesla. You can still get there, but it's going to take a lot longer. And that, quite frankly, for the companies that are managing this, all these directories and maps and apps, for them, it's just harder. They'd rather have it programmatically delivered to them in the perfectly recognizable format. So every publisher and every platform we work with has a custom API because they all want the data a little differently. So it's literally, I want to say within the first 24 hours, you'll see the vast majority of the network already updated. The only time it could take a little longer is if you have other things. We joked about this, like if you had like a cousin's nephew doing your Facebook page 6 years ago, that page might still be out there. It could take time for us to then find the right page, take control of the page, or delete or remove that page. There's those elements, but for the most part, you're going to see basically all of it done in the first couple of days.
Don't worry, Christian. That never happens in the cinema industry.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I work with a lot of industries. It happens in every industry. It's sort of it's the cousin who's also a yoga instructor. It's not this is not their prime job, so they're not paying attention.
I manage my friend's band's Facebook page terribly.
Excellent. See,
you're hire Box Office to do it.
There you go. So Scott is a perfect example of what you shouldn't do in this space.
None of you have heard of this band, so there's the evidence. All right, I think we're about 45 minutes into this. So unless there's any other questions, I'd say we could probably wrap this up. So.
Excellent. And the last thing I would say is we have the contact slide. You have Scott and Michelle's information, and please send through any additional questions. We're happy to answer, and we'll get back to you with whatever we haven't covered today.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Christian. It's been really insightful for everyone. So thank you so much for being able to join us today as well.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Everybody.